all the established laws of physics. I mean, so this is kind of important, okay? Darrell Bem, actually this is Charles Honerton, who is an active promoter of parapsychology. In a famous review, found that a number of these kinds of telepathy effects could be enhanced by putting the receiver in what he called a Ganzfeld. And basically the idea here is you put kind of half ping pong balls over the person's eyes and soundproofing earphones and put them in a sensory deprivation tank to kind of reduce all the extraneous environmental stimulation to allow this very relatively weak parapsychological signal to get through. Honerton claimed that over a bunch of studies using these restricted sensory environments that subjects could perform better than chance at basically guessing which of two photos, which of four photos a sender was looking at, or which of four Zener cards, or whatever. We just won't do this here. But basically, here is a case where the base rate is 0.25, 1 out of 4, and Honerton and Darrell Bem, this prominent psychologist at Cornell, summarized these effects as an average hit rate of 0.32, which is greater than you would expect by chance. But even these studies are subject to the kinds of problems that the National Research Council identified, so that it turns out that the more experimental controls you pile on to these studies, the more the effect disappears. So here is, where are we here? There we are. There's a really good one. Here we've got a review by Storm and Ertel of the effect sizes in these Ganzfeld studies plotted as a function of the year in which the study was published, the idea being that the more recent studies have better experimental controls. And what you can see is that the effect size progressively goes to 0, okay? The more experimental, the more rigorous the experimental controls, the more the effect disappears entirely, okay? So it looks like, as far as we can tell, we don't have minds without bodies. The rigorous controls are when the rigorous controls are in place, the evidence disappears. But that hasn't stopped people from trying, okay? Recently, there have been a series of claims about the survival of consciousness after death. Claims, for example, that surgical patients who might die on the operating table but then are resuscitated have out-of-body experiences in which they experience themselves as floating away from their bodies and looking down on the surgical team, and also the near-death experience where people have died and been revived, so often report experiences of going through a tunnel towards a bright light and all sorts of things like that. These are very, very, very dramatic and popular claims, have led to a whole bunch of recent books about this, one of which was recently turned into a movie portraying the experiences of a 5-year-old child who had these kinds of experiences. This is almost all at the level of anecdote right now, but even here, the determined experimenters are trying to make an empirical science out of this. There is, at the moment, an ongoing prospective study of the near-death experience with surgical patients who will sometimes have these out-of-body experiences during surgery. And what the experimenters have done has been to, say, put some kind of cue, like a number, in the operating room in a place where you could only see it if you were on the ceiling. Okay? And then if somebody comes back and said, I had this really weird experience where I felt like I was coming out of my body and I was looking over things, they say, what, did you see any numbers? You know, what numbers did you see? So far, not so good, right? But again, you can see how you could actually investigate these claims scientifically if you wanted to do that. The fact that the science turns out not to support the claims is something else entirely. Okay, that's a purely empirical matter. But if you're interested enough in spending the time to pursue these kinds of ideas, you can actually do a science out of even this claim that minds exist in the absence of bodies. First mind-body problem, the effect of the body on the mind, the neural correlates of consciousness. The second mind-body problem, the problem of psychosomatics. Do mental states have an effect on mind-body on bodily processes? Third mind-body problem, can you have minds without bodies? Probably not, but research is ongoing on this question. The fourth of these problems is, can you have basically bodies without mind? Okay? And the answer is, well, of course you can. Okay? We have a whole bunch of behaviors, for example, that organisms engage in without benefit of anything like conscious mental states. We have reflexes of various kinds, taxis, gross motor responses. We have instinctual behaviors of various kinds. None of these seem to involve expectations or beliefs or perceptions or the like. Traditional interpretations of classical and instrumental conditioning don't make any reference to mental states. They just talk about relationships between stimulus and response. So it's possible to argue then that you can have behavior, bodies in motion, without any kind of mental state. This is a problem we'll take up next time, the problem of zombies, okay? And I'll, at the beginning of the hour, I'll make the point that what you read, say, in places like Rev and Swill about philosophers' zombies, that's not quite the zombie problem I want you to think about. The real zombie problem is not the philosopher's zombie. The people who are really problematic are the Hollywood zombies, creatures that behave but don't appear to have any consciousness at all. And the question is, what can you do behaviorally without consciousness? Right? We'll start taking that up next time. Thank you very much.